Hi, and welcome back to my channel. This video today is for those of you who are interested in working in the diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI space. There are a few things that you should be aware of before you dive in or start exploring the industry, and so I'm going to guide you through a few of those things, as well as some of the skills and competencies that are necessary to be a DE&I professional. So to get started, let's first clarify and level set on what the words diversity, equity, and inclusion actually mean. Diversity, simply put, is really the presence of differences, right? Often people think of it as just the big three, which are gender, race/ethnicity, and sexual orientation. However, diversity is so much more than that. We can think about people's abilities and disabilities, religious affiliations, cultures, socioeconomic statuses. You get the drift, right? So all of those things contribute to our collective mix of differences as humans. Second is this idea of equity, right? Which is really about promoting fairness or impartiality. One of my favorite visuals for understanding equity and differentiating it from equality is the bike illustration. So equality really takes on this sort of one-size-fits-all approach, giving everyone the same shape and size bike, assuming they'll make it work, right? Whereas equity, on the other hand, requires us to look at individual needs and really provide people with what they need. So we're giving everyone a bike at the end of the day, but we're giving them one that is customized to their needs, allowing them to really thrive and do their best work. Equity is really a critical component for making sure that no one is left behind. Third is inclusion, which is really about making sure that all that are diverse not only feel welcomed into a space, but they also have their voices heard, right? And they actually contribute to decision making. And just to note, there are a number of variations of DEI out there. Previously and historically, it's been D&I, diversity and inclusion, but now you may also see IND or IED, which put an emphasis on inclusion and equity before diversity. There's also DEIB, which adds on this idea of belonging. There's also DEIA, which adds on this idea of access, and there are a number of others out there. But essentially, all of these acronyms refer to the same body of work. DEI at the moment is most commonly used, and it's what I like to use because, quite frankly, I just don't feel the need to reinvent the wheel. For me, the work itself and the outcomes are much more important than the title or the order of the words. So now that we have that out of the way, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace or within an organization, DEI is really this catch-all term used to describe the various strategies, initiatives, programs, policies, etc. that really foster representation and participation of individuals from a variety of backgrounds. Diversity. From my experience over the years, I've identified 6 primary focus areas that DEI work really falls under. First is leadership engagement, which really centers around leadership expectations and inclusive best practices. So do your leaders walk the talk, right? Or talk the walk. Walk the talk? Walk the talk. Second is communication. So thinking about how do we actually embed DEI into our internal and external interactions. Third is recruiting. How do we actually evolve our mindset, our practices, our partnerships that we use to attract talent? Fourth is data and impact. And this is really about establishing a usable data set, both quantitative and qualitative data that we can use to make really informed decisions and identify solutions to problem solve or troubleshoot inequities. Fifth is employee enablement, which is really about establishing shared ownership of fostering inclusive and equitable workplaces. And sixth is employee development, which is really making sure that all employees have equitable access to resources, to training, to whatever they need to further develop their careers. Now, I won't speak to all of these areas in detail today, but just know that the vast majority of DEI work generally falls into one or more of these categories. An imperative to DEI work is a strong emphasis on change management and organizational development. Now, historically, DEI has sort of been an add-on to existing HR and people team roles. However, that's changed. We're now seeing more defined roles, more clear objectives and responsibilities. For example, if you're looking at entry-level positions, you may see DEI coordinators and assistants. If we're looking at more mid-level roles, you'll see things such as DEI project and program managers. You may see business partners, you may see analysts. And finally, there are, of course, more senior or executive level roles, right? Such as Director of DEI and Chief Diversity Officer. Now, the path to working in the DEI space can vary significantly, right? I know plenty of people like myself who entered this space through recruiting. Some others came in through HR and L&D, learning and development. There are also people who came into this work by way of studying psychology, social studies, and other fields. And of course, there are people who, due to their identities or their experiences, just simply found themselves wanting to make a transition into working in DEI full time. And what's most important is that you identify your existing transferable skills and then work to strengthen the others that you have. So let's talk about some of those skills and competencies that are necessary to work in DEI. First, it's important to note that belonging to a marginalized or underrepresented group does not make you qualified to be a DEI practitioner or professional. Nor does having a child or a significant other that belongs to an underrepresented group qualify you. Of course, it doesn't hurt, right, to have that unique perspective and experience to share, to leverage for your work, but know that that is not enough. There are a number of skills and competencies that are critical to working in this space. I won't talk through all of them, but I do want to highlight a few. I'm a huge fan of research, so I'm leveraging a study that was conducted by the Conference Board, which, if you're not familiar, the Conference Board is a nonprofit organization that conducts research and produces insights to support over 1,000 private and public organizations across more than 60 countries. So they conducted this study back in 2008. The link is in the description below. And they identified 7 buckets of core competencies that DEI professionals should possess. The first is change management. Second is diversity, inclusion, and global perspective. Third is business acumen. Fourth is strategic external relations. Fifth is integrity. Sixth is visionary and strategic leadership. And 7 are HR competencies. Like I said, this study is from 2008, so it's a little out of date, but from my experience and conversations that I've had with other DEI professionals, this list of skills is still very much so relevant to our work today. So if you're interested in working in DEI, or if you're already working in this space and you're just simply trying to level up or elevate your career, definitely check out the study. It really breaks down these buckets into more defined, tangible skills, which you can use to really benchmark and track your growth and your progress as you go along your career path. Now, one skill that wasn't touched on or explored in this study is self-awareness. And in fact, when they conducted the survey amongst these diversity professionals in this study, they asked them to list the top skills that they thought were necessary to achieve global success in the DEI space. And self-awareness was actually listed last, with only one person indicating that it was a key skill or competency to their success. Now, if you're working in the DEI space, and particularly if you are someone who identifies as a marginalized individual or belonging to an underrepresented group, you have to be self-aware so that you can practice self-care, right? Working in the DEI space is emotionally taxing and burnout is very real. Every successful DEI professional that I've encountered has been insanely introspective and aware of their limits. And so I just want to share that is so important to be mindful as you go into this field and as you go on to explore this work. The last thing that I'll touch on here is education. A lot of folks often ask if they need a specific educational background or a DEI certification to do this work. And in short, the answer is no. Sure, you can get an MBA or other professional level degree. There are also a number of DEI certifications out there, but is it a necessity? Not so much. There's just so much nuance and ambiguity in the DEI space that much of the skills that you will develop and much of the knowledge that you'll acquire to become a subject matter expert, if you will, is simply based on experience and trial and error, right? It's about trying things, iterating, being creative. It's also important to note that many of the traditional approaches and frameworks to DEI that a lot of these programs and certifications have centered themselves around haven't worked in the past, but you do want to be aware of what's worked and what hasn't, right? For example, you should be well versed as a DEI professional on affirmative action. Just as an example, you want to know what were the pros and the cons of affirmative action and how did it get us to where we are today? How did affirmative action transition into the DEI industry or space as we know it today? So I hope this was helpful for you all that are interested in working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you have any questions or if there are specific topics that you'd like me to talk more about, please leave a comment below. And of course, please subscribe to this channel so that you can get updates with future content. And until next time, be well.